The breaking point. The Galactic Council chamber gleamed with the polished precision of a society that had known stability for millennia. Massive crystalline pillars supported a dome that captured the light of 3 nearby stars, splitting it into a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the gathered representatives. In the center of this grand display stood a single human woman, Ambassador Elena Reyes, looking decidedly out of place. "Humans require an extension on the technological integration deadline," she said, her voice firm despite the murmurs that rippled through the assembled aliens. "Our engineers are still adapting your propulsion designs to work with our existing infrastructure." Counselor Vex Thalar of the Arctians leaned forward, his 6 eyes blinking in what humans had come to recognize as their version of condescension. "This is the 3rd extension your species has requested this solar cycle. Perhaps we overestimated humanity's capacity for adaptation." Elena bit back her first response. This was diplomacy, after all, and humanity needed the Council's good graces. They were newcomers to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 years ago. In a community of species that measured their civilizations in thousands of years, humans were infants, talented, unpredictable infants that the older races had taken under their collective wing. "We appreciate the Council's patience," she said instead. "Earth and its colonies will meet the deadline." As she left the chamber, Elena's assistant, Miguel, fell into step beside her. "They're never going to see us as equals, are they?" he muttered. "Not if we keep asking for help with everything," she replied. "But they're the ones with the technology, the resources, the established networks. What choice do we have?" The answer to that question came sooner than anyone expected. 2 months after the Council meeting, the first reports arrived of something the galactic community hadn't seen in generations: a genuine crisis. The Void Plague, as it was quickly named, spread through ship systems with terrifying speed. Any vessel that came into contact with an infected ship soon developed the same symptoms: communications failures, navigation errors, and finally, complete systems shutdown. For a galactic civilization that relied on constant interstellar travel, it was catastrophic. The Council immediately established quarantine zones, but it was too late. The plague had already reached dozens of major trade hubs, including 3 human colonies. In the emergency session that followed, the Council's true priorities became painfully clear. "Resources will be allocated according to the Galactic Crisis Protocol," announced High Counselor Zinzarath of the Medusan Collective. "Category 1 worlds will receive immediate assistance. Category 2 within the week. Category 3 as resources permit." Elena didn't need to check the classification to know where human settlements fell. Earth was Category 2, barely, but all human colonies were firmly in Category 3, the lowest priority. "Our Ganymede colony has less than a month of oxygen reserves without supply ships," she protested. "New Terra's agricultural systems are failing. We need immediate assistance." "The protocol is clear, Ambassador," replied Zinzarath. "Your species knew the terms when you joined the Council. Category 3 worlds must wait." As the weeks passed, it became clear that wait meant fend for yourselves. The promised aid never materialized. Communications with isolated colonies grew desperate, then sporadic, then silent. On Earth, governments fell as people demanded action their leaders couldn't provide. In this darkest hour, something changed in humanity's approach to the crisis. If help wasn't coming, they would have to save themselves. On the isolated mining colony of Ceres, engineers found they could modify their deep-core drilling equipment to generate a unique electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disrupted the Void Plug's progression. The solution wasn't elegant. It fried half their own systems in the process, but it bought them time. On New Terra, agricultural scientists spliced Earth crops with native flora to create hybrid plants that required 70% less water and power to cultivate. The resulting food was bitter and strange-looking, but it kept the colonists alive. At the Jupiter Research Station, a team led by Dr. Sanjay Kapoor worked without sleep for 2 weeks straight to develop what they called salvage drones, autonomous machines that could board abandoned ships, extract critical supplies, and return without human pilots risking infection. None of these solutions followed the carefully documented procedures the Council had established over centuries. They were messy, improvised, and sometimes dangerous. But they worked. 3 months into the crisis, Alina attended another Council meeting, this time not to ask for help but to share information. The Council representatives listened with mixed reactions as she detailed humanity's unconventional approaches. "These methods have not been tested for long-term safety," objected Councillor Threll of the Parnathian Unity. "The salvage drones in particular violate at least 7 established safety protocols." "With respect, Councillor," Alina replied, "we didn't have the luxury of running centuries-long safety trials. Our people were dying." "Nevertheless," Threll continued, "such improvisation sets a dangerous precedent. The Council has developed its protocols through millennia of experience." Alina felt something snap inside her, the last thread of deference to these beings who watched from safety while human colonies struggled to survive. "Your protocols would have left half our colonies dead," she said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "Humanity has lost 30,000 lives to the Void Plague, not because we couldn't be saved, but because we were deemed less important than others." The chamber fell silent. This was not how things were done in the Council. Disagreements were couched in polite diplomatic language, not raw emotion. "We understand your distress, Ambassador," said High Counselor Zinzarath finally. "But emotional outbursts do not change galactic realities. Your species is young. Your contributions to our shared civilization minimal. The protocols exist to preserve the greatest achievements of our collective cultures." "And what good are those achievements," Alina asked quietly, "if they can't save people who need saving?" She left the chamber without being dismissed, another violation of protocol. As the doors closed behind her, the Council representatives exchanged troubled glances. Something was happening with the humans, something unprecedented. Over the next year, as the Void Plague gradually receded, humanity continued to develop its own solutions rather than waiting for Council assistance. The salvage drone program expanded into a full-fledged autonomous fleet that reclaimed hundreds of abandoned vessels. The electromagnetic disruption technology pioneered on Ceres evolved into a more sophisticated system that could not only halt the Void Plague, but potentially reverse its effects. More significantly, human colonies began forming direct trade partnerships with each other, bypassing the Council's centralized networks. They established their own communication protocols, their own emergency response systems, their own research initiatives. The Council watched these developments with growing concern. Never before had a Category 3 civilization shown such rapid adaptation without central guidance. It wasn't just unusual, it was unsettling. When the Council finally sent investigators to human colonies, what they found shocked them. The colonists had not only survived, they had innovated in ways that defied conventional galactic thinking. Their technology was strange, cobbled together from disparate sources, but effective. Their social structures had evolved to emphasize flexibility and rapid decision-making, rather than stability and consensus. Most concerning of all, they no longer looked to the Council for approval or assistance. When the official delegation arrived on New Terra with offers of rehabilitation assistance, the colonial governor politely but firmly declined. "We appreciate the Council's concern," she told the stunned representatives, "but we've managed on our own for this long. We'll continue to do so." Word of this unprecedented rejection spread quickly through Council space. Some dismissed it as human arrogance, a phase that would pass once the crisis fully abated. Others recognized it as something more significant: the emergence of a new and unpredictable player in galactic politics. High Counselor Zinzarath, older and wiser than most, perhaps understood best what was happening. "We have made a grave miscalculation," he told his inner circle. "We assumed the humans would either perish or learn to follow our ways. Instead, they have found a third path, one we never anticipated. What should we do?" asked one of his advisors. The High Counselor gazed out at the spectacular view of the galactic core from his private chambers. "Watch them closely," he said finally. "The humans are becoming something new, and in all my centuries, I have never seen a species transform itself so quickly." As the first year of independence drew to a close, Elena Reyes stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned Earth vessel Prometheus, watching as construction drones swarmed around what would become humanity's first independently developed interstellar station. No council blueprints, no alien oversight, no carefully measured assistance with patronizing instructions attached. "They're starting to worry, you know," said Admiral Chen, coming to stand beside her. "Our council observers report a lot of closed-door sessions about the human situation." Elena smiled slightly. "Good. Maybe next time they won't be so quick to categorize us as an afterthought." "Do you think there will be consequences?" the Admiral asked. Elena turned to look at the stars beyond the construction site. Vast, unclaimed expanses where humanity might forge its own path. "Undoubtedly," she said. "But we're done begging for scraps at their table. From now on, we build our own future." The rise of Terran influence. 5 years after the Voidplug crisis, the landscape of galactic politics had shifted dramatically. What began as humanity's desperate struggle for survival had evolved into something the Galactic Council never expected: a legitimate challenge to their millennia of unquestioned authority. The Prometheus station, once just a symbol of human independence, had become the heart of what humans now called the Terran Alliance, a network of colonies, research outposts, and trading hubs that operated largely outside Council jurisdiction. The station itself was unlike anything in Council space, a strange hybrid of salvaged alien technology and human innovation that defied standard classification. Admiral Chen, now Director of Terran Security, stood beside Ambassador Reyes as they welcomed their first official diplomatic delegation from a non-human species. The Nixteri were insectoid beings from the Outer Rim, traditionally aligned with the Council, but increasingly interested in human advancements. "Your adaptive shielding technology is most impressive," said the Nixteri ambassador, their mandibles clicking with what humans had learned was excitement. "Our scientists did not believe it possible to reconfigure defense systems in real time against multiple types of weapons." "Necessity breeds innovation, Ambassador," Elena replied. "When the Council couldn't protect our colonies, we had to develop systems that could adapt quickly to unknown threats." The Nixteri's compound eyes gleamed. "The Council claims your methods are dangerous, untested across sufficient timescales. And yet," Director Chen interjected, "your people are here seeking trade agreements for those same dangerous technologies." The Nixteri made a gesture that translated roughly to amused acknowledgement. "The Council's caution has its place. But so does, what is your human expression? Thinking outside the containment field." "Close enough," Elena smiled. This meeting was just one of dozens happening across Terran space. Species that had traditionally deferred to the Council in all matters were beginning to reach out directly to humans. Some came for technology, others for trade deals unencumbered by Council regulations, and some simply out of curiosity about the upstarts who had defied galactic convention and thrived. Not everyone was pleased with humanity's rising influence. The Arxians, traditional military leaders in Council space, viewed the expanding Terran presence as a potential threat. The Medusan Collective, whose technological monopolies were being undermined by human innovation, lobbied for sanctions against unregulated technological proliferation. The tension came to a head when a Terran exploration vessel discovered something unprecedented in an uncharted system: a precursor artifact, fully intact. The precursors were the mythical first civilization, vanished eons ago, but believed to have seeded the galaxy with the foundations of all current technology. Finding their artifacts was extraordinarily rare. Finding one intact was unprecedented. According to long-established Council protocol, all precursor discoveries were to be immediately reported to the Archaeological Oversight Committee, who would dispatch specialized teams to secure and study the find over several decades before releasing any findings. The Terran Alliance had other ideas. "We're establishing a research outpost," announced Director Chen at an emergency council session. "Our scientists are already studying the artifact. We'll share our findings with the galactic community as they develop." The council chamber erupted in protest. Councillor Vex Thalar of the Arctians was particularly vehement. "This is outrageous. Precursor technology is too dangerous for unregulated study. Your species barely understands the fundamentals of galactic engineering, and you presume to tamper with the work of the ancients." Elena stepped forward. In the years since the crisis, she had abandoned the deferential posture of her early diplomatic career. "The artifact was discovered in unclaimed space by a Terran vessel. Under your own laws of salvage, that gives us primary research rights. Laws of salvage apply to abandoned ships and stations, not the sacred technology of the precursors," countered Councillor Threll. High Councillor Zinzarath raised a limb for silence. Unlike many of his peers, he had watched humanity's rise with more curiosity than alarm. "The legal question is complex," he acknowledged, "but more pressing is the safety concern. Precursor technology has been known to have unpredictable effects when activated improperly." "We're aware of the risks," Elena replied, "but we're not approaching this with your timescales. The artifact appears to be a communications device of some kind. Understanding it could revolutionize interstellar travel and communication. All the more reason for careful, methodical study under council supervision," insisted Vex Thalar. The debate continued for hours, but the reality was that the council had no practical way to enforce their protocols. The Terran outpost was already established, protected by the Alliance's new adaptive shield technology, and staffed with the brightest minds from across human space. 3 months later, the Council's worst fears seemed justified when all communication with the Terran research outpost abruptly ceased. Emergency sessions were convened, contingency plans drafted for containing whatever catastrophe the reckless humans had unleashed. The Arctians pushed for immediate military intervention. "We must secure the artifact before whatever the humans have done spreads beyond that system," Vex Thalar insisted. As the Council prepared their response, a Terran vessel appeared in orbit around the Council homeworld. A technological impossibility, as no ship should have been able to bypass the planet's detection grid. More shocking still was the method of its arrival, not through conventional space, but simply appearing as if it had always been there. The vessel transmitted a single message: "The Prometheus Protocol is successful. Terran Ambassador requests immediate audience with full council." When Elena walked into the council chamber hours later, she did so not through the main entrance, but by simply stepping out of thin air in the center of the room, causing several councillors to recoil in shock. "Apologies for the dramatic entrance," she said, not sounding particularly apologetic. "We're still refining the interface." "What have you done?" demanded Vex Thalar. "We've deciphered the precursor artifact," Elena explained calmly. "It wasn't a communications device, as we initially thought. It's a node in a network that exists, adjacent to normal space. The precursors didn't just travel through space. They found a way to step outside it entirely." The implications were staggering. Such technology would render traditional space travel obsolete, along with most defensive systems, border controls, and the carefully maintained power balances that had defined galactic politics for millennia. "This power cannot be controlled by one species," declared Threll, "especially not one as young and unpredictable as humanity." Elena nodded. "We agree." This simple statement stunned the Council into silence. "The Terran Alliance has no intention of monopolizing this discovery," she continued. "We're proposing a joint development initiative, open to all species, governed by a new framework that we develop together. Not the old Council protocols that would have buried this discovery in committees for centuries, but not unregulated development either." "Why would you share such power when you could keep it for yourselves?" asked High Councillor Zinzarath, genuinely curious. Elena smiled slightly. "Because that's the difference between you and us, Councillor. When the crisis came, you protected your achievements above all else, We learn to protect each other and to recognize that diversity of approach leads to better solutions. This is a trick, insisted Vex Villar. No species surrenders advantage willingly. We're not surrendering anything, Elena replied firmly. We're offering a genuine partnership, one where humanity has an equal seat at the table, not as supplicants or junior members to be patronized, but as full contributors to galactic civilization. The debate that followed lasted for days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The humans had changed the game completely. The Council could fight the inevitable, or they could adapt, something they had preached but rarely practiced themselves. 1 year later, the first ships equipped with what came to be called precursor drives began operation under the newly formed Galactic Cooperative, an organization where the old Council members sat alongside humans and a dozen previously marginalized species. The power structure that had defined the galaxy for thousands of years had been fundamentally transformed. On the observation deck of the Prometheus station, now a bustling hub of interspecies cooperation, Elena stood with Director Chen watching vessels from across the galaxy dock and depart. "Do you ever wonder if we moved too quickly?" Chen asked. The Council wasn't entirely wrong about careful deliberation having its place. Elena considered this. Speed wasn't the issue. It was the willingness to try, to risk failure, to admit when we're wrong and change course. That's what the Council could never understand. Progress isn't about perfect solutions. It's about the courage to seek better ones. And now they fear us, Chen noted. I see it in every negotiation. They remember how quickly we went from begging for help to reshaping their reality. Fear isn't what we wanted, Elena said, watching as a massive Arxian vessel docked alongside smaller human ships. Respect was enough. But perhaps they needed to fear us before they could respect us. And what happens when the next crisis comes? Asked Shen. Elena smiled as she watched representatives from a dozen species disembarking, moving toward a future none of them could have imagined just years before. Then we'll face it together, she said, not as subordinates or superiors, but as equals, each bringing our own strengths to the challenge. That's the legacy we're building. Not a human galaxy, but one where every voice matters. As she spoke, a message arrived from Earth. The latest precursor research had yielded another breakthrough, something that would push the boundaries of what was possible even further. The journey that had begun in desperation, when humanity stopped asking for help and started creating its own solutions, was far from over. The day humanity stopped begging and became feared was now simply the first chapter in a much larger story, one where fear had given way to something far more powerful, the recognition that the greatest strength of any civilization lies not in stability, but in its capacity to change.